Welcome to The Explainer. We're about to dive into this incredible science that basically explains why every living thing is exactly where you find it.
Have you ever wondered about stuff like that? They're like these big biological puzzles, right? And today, we're going to dig into the science that actually solves them.
So what is this science? Well, it's called ecology. And what it does is it gives us this huge, big picture view of how all life on Earth is connected and how it all works together. All right, here's the game plan for our journey today. Okay, so first up, let's get this straight. Ecology, at its heart, is all about asking why. Why do some animals live here and not there? Why are some plants shaped in these really specific, kind of weird ways?
And really, when you get right down to it, it's all about how organisms are perfectly suited or adapted to their homes. And it's all for one big reason. It's not just about staying alive. It's about successfully reproducing and passing on those genes to the next generation.
So what actually sets the stage for all this life? Well, it all starts with the non-living parts of our planet, the physical environment itself.
Yeah, there are basically four key non-living, or scientists call them abiotic factors. Think of these as the fundamental rules of the game for life on Earth. We're talking temperature, water, light, and soil. That's it. These four things shape everything.
And it's amazing when you think about it. Just by tweaking two of those rules, temperature and water, you can create completely different worlds. You get everything from a scorching hot desert to a super dense, soaking wet rainforest.
And these abiotic rules, they're not just creating extremes. They're crafting diverse biomes all over the globe. Take India's deciduous forests, for example, where life is totally tuned to the rhythm of the changing seasons.
And it's not just on land. These rules also sculpt really dynamic places like the seacoast. Imagine being an organism there. You've got to constantly deal with changing tides, salt levels. It's a tough gig. Okay, so we've set the stage, right? We have the rules of the planet. Now, how do individual organisms actually cope with all these challenges?
Well, the number one challenge for pretty much any living thing is keeping things stable on the inside. It's a concept called homeostasis. It's like how your body works so hard to stay at a steady 37 degrees Celsius, no matter if it's freezing cold or boiling hot outside. That's homeostasis in action. When it comes to this, organisms basically fall into two main camps. First, you've got the regulators, think of us or bears, who work hard to keep their internal environment constant. Then you have the conformers, like a lizard, whose bodies just kind of go with the flow and match whatever the temperature is outside.
And being a regulator, that's a huge evolutionary advantage. Sure, it burns a ton of energy, but as evolutionary biologists point out, it's pretty much the secret to the success of mammals. It's why we can live basically anywhere, from the Sahara to Antarctica. So when things get stressful, organisms have this toolkit with four main strategies. They can regulate, they can conform, or they can just get out of there and migrate. And if that doesn't work, the last option is to just suspend everything, like hibernation, and wait for better times. Now this is where it gets really cool. Over millions of years, these survival strategies have led to some of the most incredible, mind-blowing designs in the natural world. These incredible designs? We call them adaptations, and an adaptation can be pretty much any trait, whether it's a physical feature, an internal process, or even a behavior that helps an organism survive and reproduce in its home. They're like nature's perfect solutions to local problems. And this design genius it's everywhere you look. You've got kangaroo rats that literally make their own water from the fat in their food. You've got cacti that turn their leaves into spines to stop water loss. Or how about seals? They have this thick layer of blubber that's basically a built-in, super-insulated wetsuit for living in polar seas. And some of these adaptations follow predictable patterns. There's something called Allen's rule, which basically says that mammals in colder climates tend to have shorter ears and limbs to hold in heat. It perfectly explains why an Arctic fox has these cute tiny ears, while a desert fox has those huge ones to get rid of heat. It's all about temperature control. So, have you ever experienced altitude sickness? If you have, then you've actually felt your own body trying to adapt to a stressful new environment. That headache, the fatigue, that's your body reacting. What's happening is your body is struggling with the low oxygen. But give it a few days, and it starts to compensate. It ramps up production of red blood cells to carry more oxygen.
Now, this isn't a permanent genetic change like we saw with the fox's ears. It's a short-term, temporary fix, and we call that acclimatization.
Okay, but survival isn't just a solo mission, right? Organisms don't live in a vacuum. So let's zoom out a bit, from the individual to the whole group, to the population level.
And this is a key idea. A population has characteristics that an individual just doesn't have. I mean, you and I have a birthday and eventually a death day, but a population, it has a birth rate and a death rate. It also has a sex ratio and an age structure, things that only make sense when you're looking at the whole group.
And you can learn a lot by looking at a population's age structure, which we often show as a pyramid. If you see a pyramid with a really wide base, that means there are lots of young individuals. It's a clear sign that the population is growing.
Now, if that pyramid looks more like a straight-up column with the age groups pretty evenly distributed, that tells you the population is stable. It's not really growing or shrinking.
And finally, if the pyramid is top-heavy with a narrow base, well, that means there are fewer young ones, and that's a classic sign of a population in decline.
All right, for our last section, let's zoom back out one last time and connect all of these ideas to a really important issue we're all facing today.
The source material itself highlights this, that there's this growing, widespread concern about the gradual increase in average global temperatures. And what does that do? Well, it directly messes with one of those fundamental abiotic rules we talked about right at the beginning, temperature.
And that leaves us with a really big and frankly a really critical question. We've just spent this whole time talking about how life is so perfectly, so intricately adapted to its world, a process that took millions of years. So what happens when that world starts to change and changes faster than life can keep up?